pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for coming out. It's a pleasure to see all of you. We have some people that are to be honored tonight. First thing we need to do is the approval of agenda, and we added 9B. It went out without 9B being on the published one. So do I hear approval of agenda with 9B added?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Second?
Second.
Oh, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. Next, we have presentations and recognitions. Public Works Technician Lavelle Jenkins, 15 years of service. Front and center, man. He's heard that before.
I'm substituting for our Public Works Director, Willie Midget, this evening. And this is in recognition of your service, Lavelle, for 15 years of service, faithful and dedicated service to the town, from September 27th, 1999 through September 27th, 2014, presented the 6th day of October by the mayor and the town council. And I just wanted to also note that Lavelle is one of our valued employees. He is very dedicated to the town, and we really appreciate everything that you have done in the last 15 years. Thank you very much.
And thank you from the council. John is absolutely correct. If we ever see anybody out there cleaning the paths and mowing the grass and keeping everything in order, you're one of them for sure, and you're always on time and there. Thank you. All right, the next is Fire Department Honors, and Chief Spivey, you're going to take care of that, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and members in attendance. I would ask Firefighter Jesse McNeil to come forward. Captain Cole Yates would be here tonight also, but he's on vacation. And you face him, you don't we served him, but we work for him. I'll give him straight nightmare. But he is on vacation, he's in Ocracoke, so if possible, maybe we could bring him in and recognize him at a later date. But on August 6, 2014, at approximately 2:43 p.m., Kitty Hawk Fire Department responded to a water rescue at the Wright Memorial Bridge. Based on the reports of the first responders already on the bridge, we were certain that we had a person in the water. Captain Cole Yates and Firefighter Jesse McNeil were directed to respond via jet ski to the bridge. On arrival, Captain Yates began performing free dives into approximately 10 foot of water with limited visibility, while Firefighter McNeil maintained a visual on Captain Yates keeping the jet ski in close proximity to the dive area. The currents were strong, and several times Captain Yates had to be redirected back to the search area. Captain Yates continued to search nonstop for approximately 40 minutes until he located the subject on the bottom, approximately 10 to 12 feet from the bridge. Although the subject was not revivable, Captain Yates' efforts to locate the subject was commendable and took great effort on his part. Together, he and Firefighter Jesse McNeil, operating as a team in difficult conditions, and their performance had a direct and positive impact on the incident. Due to his response and efforts, we're awarding Captain Cole Yates a Meritorious Conduct Award, which is given to individuals who perform exceptionally well on the scene of a particular difficult or unusual incident. His actions on that day resulted in a positive impact on a challenging situation. Firefighter Jesse McNeil is being awarded a unit citation for his efforts and performance at the dive operation, during which time he maintained a platform for safety and was in a position to assist his fellow crew member in case of any unanticipated emergency. His actions demonstrated outstanding teamwork that had a direct impact on the operations of the scene. And tonight, we would like to award Jesse a unit citation. Thank you, Jesse. Next, if I could get Firefighter Jeremy Wilkins, Jasper Rogers, and David McCullough. Tonight, we would like to recognize them for a job well done. On Saturday, May 31st, 2014, at approximately 07:45 a.m., firefighters Jesse McNeil, David McCullough, Jasper Rogers, and Jeremy Wilkins were traveling west on Shortcut Road to attend High Angle Tower Rescue class in Elizabeth City. While driving, they came upon an accident involving one vehicle that had overturned into a canal running alongside the road. Seeing only one deputy sheriff arriving on scene and a female victim suspended upside down in the vehicle with water entering the vehicle, they immediately sprang into action. Working as a crew and using the available medical equipment that they had on the vehicle, they entered the partially submerged vehicle and conducted a quick assessment of the victim and confirming that she was the only occupant of the vehicle. They subsequently supported her C-spine while in an upside-down condition. After calming the victim, they carefully removed her from the vehicle and water and moved her to a safe location where further harm was eliminated. She was then attended by a local emergency medical response team who had arrived on scene in Camden. Due to their quick and professional actions while acting as a single unit and crew, they entered into a dangerous condition and mitigated an incident that could have resulted in a much worse or tragic ending. Tonight, we are honoring these members with a unit citation for their actions. A unit citation is awarded to companies, units, or specialty teams who perform in a superior manner on the scene of an incident or during the course of a year. The companies, units, or teams receiving the award must demonstrate outstanding teamwork and ingenuity that have a direct impact on the smooth operations at the scene of an incident or have had a positive impact on the town, fire department, or services that we provide. And tonight, they each receive a unit citation.
That's my boys right there. They wanted to go watch. I know Mike get around, but.
Perfectly all right.
Yeah, let them come back in.
I just wanted to be up there with you,
And that would have been all right, too.
too. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And in the first instance, I will say that as tragic as it is for someone to be deceased, it's equally tragic if you don't have the remains. As a Coast Guard officer, I've investigated many cases where people were lost at sea, and my investigation was the only thing that allowed for a death certificate and all the other things that are required. So recovering the body is important in that case. In the other case, the fact that you folks were on scene and took the initiative to do what was right is always welcome. And we appreciate that and appreciate the service you do for the town. Thank you very much.
Mayor, I know that they're gonna have to leave because they've got their association meeting. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lavelle.
Good job. Thanks,
Well,
Lavelle.
there goes our audience.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, well, we still have a member of the Recreation Committee here.
All right, next we have public comment. They probably all left, but anyway, do we have some public comment?
Yes, Gwen White. Come on up here, John. Seems strange to be here. When I used to cover this as a newspaper, it was when Jeff Pruitt was just a little thing at Kitty Hawk School. And old Bobby had a full head of dark hair. So, with me tonight is Ron Curtis, who is one of the board members of the VIP Fishing Tournament, which is a Lions Club project for here on the Outer Banks. I'm gonna ask you and the audience, how many of you in here have heard of the VIP Fishing Tournament? That's great, because a lot of times, you know, people do not even know what goes on in their own community. Lions is the largest civic organization in the world with 1.35 million members in 207 countries. We are privileged that the VIP Fishing Tournament that was born here on the Outer Banks, this is our 32nd year, is the largest event of its kind in the world. We bring in 528 visually impaired and their sighted guests and about 350 volunteers. It will be happening October the 20th through the 22nd on 4 piers, Kitty Hawk, Avalon, Nags Head, Jeanette's, the Crystal Dawn, and the Miss Organ Inlet. We invite any of you, if you would, to stop by any of the piers between 9 and 2 to see and to welcome the people who have come from 77 counties in North Carolina. And now that we have started a national tournament, which will be on Wednesday, we have 10 states and Canada that will be participating. And our goal is to eventually have a fishing tournament in each state with their winners coming to the Outer Banks. Now, we have determined that at least 60% of our participants come and stay an extra night or come a night early, and that's at their expense, so they are bringing money into our economy, and for that we're appreciative. We could not do this without the giving community that we have in Dare County. It costs more than $200,000 a year to put this event on. Fortunately, about $100,000 of that is donated in in-kind services throughout the state of North Carolina Lions and especially this local community. However, we still have, as local Lions, in Manteo, Wanchese, Nags Head, First Flight, Currituck, Plymouth, and Columbia, have to raise over $100,000 a year to put this event on. Because we bring them in and put them up for 3 nights, feed them 8 meals, have all their fishing, their educational things. A doctor comes in to talk to them. They have vendors. It is really an independent living experience for these people. And we wanted to make sure that we invite you to stop by any of these piers, and when you see them out in the community, we have posters that we're putting out. And if you know of any place we could put one, it's great. That we're trying to say they're coming, make them feel welcome. Because we've had so many folks tell us, we've never heard of this fishing tournament. And yet we've been here for 32 years, working hard, and we want to make sure that we made the effort to come to the towns. One other thing we want to share with you that we're mighty proud of. I told you how large Lions International is. Well, Lions International this year decided that they were going to honor the VIP fishing tournament by making it a central part on their Lions float in the Rose Bowl parade. So when you happen to look at the parade, if any of you do, and catch a glimpse of the float this year, it will feature the blind fishing tournament on the Outer Banks. And if anybody has any questions of me or of Ron, it is a 501c3 corporation, and we have had great support individually from Steve Michael and his firm, from Irvin, who has always supported us. And we just want you to know that we appreciate that. Anything?
I would add that I was a member of the Lions when I was stationed in Alaska. And to show you what kind of good work they do all around our country, for example, during the 1964 earthquake in Alaska and the following tsunami, on the island of Kodiak, it was 2 or 3 native villages that got wiped out because they were on low land. And the Lions Club in Kodiak got together, and somehow they managed to move all of those people, build them a place, locate them on high ground, and they named that, the villagers named that Port Lions. So it's not just here. Lions do good work everywhere, and I understand and appreciate what you're doing with the VIPs.
And we appreciate that, and when we've had Hurricane Irene and Floyd, a number of them that have come through, we have been able to get grants that have helped folks to relocate. It's only like $10,000 to $20,000, but every little bit helps when you can go give that money to the individual.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just
And
like to
by the way,
add
we'd
that
love to have you as a lion in first flight.
I'd just like to add that I see you every year at the Kitty Hawk Pier. I walk there and
Very
I
good.
see your fishermen, and it's just an inspirational scene.
Well, stop on by on the 21st.
I will do that this year.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else signed up?
No, sir.
All right, does anyone else wish to speak at this part of the public hearing? All right, let the record show no one else came forward. Next, we have a consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
And do I hear a second? Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda is approved. We have nothing removed from it. Now we're into a public hearing. We have a text amendment. It's an application to amend our town code to clarify off-site sewage treatment systems are allowed. And this, I will say, this is a slight change from the original call because we were talking septic systems, and now we're getting into septic and treatment systems. So what we're doing tonight is having a public hearing, kind of to get the town maybe out of the whole business. So do I hear a motion to go into public hearing?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to go into public hearing.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're now in public hearing. Joe, would you give us a brief synopsis of what we're trying to accomplish?
Thank you, Mayor Perry, members of council, and members of the public in attendance.
And this is your last night, is that the way it works?
I don't know, we'll see, depends on how quickly
fast
the hiring process goes.
All right.
We'll see. But good to be back before you, and wanted to just share some information about this. This is an idea, a concept that's been bounced around back and forth between council, the planning board, and staff. and looking for a good solution for Kitty Hawk to an issue that arose. The intent of this ordinance is simply to clarify that the town of Kitty Hawk, just put it in a nutshell, does not want to be in the business of regulating the location of septic systems. So the things that it's specifically clarifying are that the town will permit, when approved by the health department, will permit off-premise locations for septic or sewage treatment systems. And they will also not dictate where on a lot that type of system can go, as long as it meets the standards of the health department. So that's kind of the general outlook to it. Specifically, the planning board did review this last at their meeting on September the 11th, where the board made a revision to what they had previously recommended to the council. The revision was done in time for us to advertise this with the current wording that you see before you this evening. So I did want to be clear on that. And basically, what it was showing would be changes to subsection 42-6C and 42-514C2. I did want to point out, Councilwoman Klutz had noted that there is one minor correction that needed to be made under the 42-6C. In that section, it references the other section I mentioned, the specific standards, and unfortunately, in what I drafted, it has subsection C2B that should read subsection C2A. So it's referring to the more detailed change that you have in the ordinance there. So I would ask that the council consider making that amendment as part of your motion to clarify the correct subsection there. I'd certainly be glad to answer any questions that the council members might have.
The only thing I would add is you were addressing septic systems and treatment systems. Septic systems are regulated by the Dare County Health. Treatment systems, don't they have a state impact too?
Depending on the type of system, particularly some of the larger systems that you would see here also do get run through the state health department as part of the review process.
Okay, so in this case, both might be involved.
Yeah. And that's why we're using the term sewage treatment system, which is the
Okay.
broader, more encompassing term.
All right. Anyone else have a question for Joe before I ask for?
Just to be sure, the correct is 514C2A, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Is anyone signed up to speak? Does anyone wish to speak at this part of the public hearing? Let the record show no one came forward. Do I hear a motion to go back into regular session?
So moved, Mr. Mayor. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're now back into regular session. What does council want to do with this particular item? Deal with it tonight? Motion to approve it? All right.
I move to adopt the proposed text amendment to subsections 42-6C and 42-514C2 with the amendment correcting the reference cited in subsection 42-6C, clarifying that off-site sewage treatment systems are allowed, subject to approval by the Dare County Environmental Health Department and State Health Department when applicable. Town council finds that the proposed text amendment is consistent with the town's adopted CAMA land use plan and finds this amendment to be in the public interest by clarifying standards and providing greater flexibility for property owners installing sewage treatment systems in the town of Kitty Hawk.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Do I hear any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're out of the septic treatment system business.
Which
We
we
thought
never
we-
thought we were in.
Yeah, right. All right, next we have planning. And we have before us, actually, 2 site plan reviews. We'll start with the Barrier Island Station Sales and Recreation Center. And before we get you into that, I think the new owner's rep would like to speak to the council and our public. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
We're going to have to get you out of a suit. You're living in Kitty Hawk now.
Appreciate you having us here tonight. We're very, very excited about this project. I'm the project project director from Gold King Resorts. We're the largest timeshare developer in the Mid-Atlantic, ranked in the top 20 nationwide. And we have found a gem in Barrier Island Station. Are very, very excited to be a part of Kitty Hawk and also what this development is going to have. We are going to spend a ton of money, be great citizens and great neighbors, and we're really, really glad to be here.
And thank you. I've looked at some of what you've proposed, and we're glad to have you here. And hurry up and develop the rest of it, because we're going to need the revenue.
Thank you.
Stick around and you'll see why.
Yeah. All right, Joe, do your part, please.
Subtlety is not one of our finer points.
That's why we got to get him out of a suit. He's on the Outer Banks now.
That's right.
All right. Well, Mayor and Council, what we have before you is, as a result of this acquisition, as Mr. Taylor discussed, the company's come in and is looking at making some significant improvements. And I'd like to share a few of the initial ones with you that are proposed this evening. Both of these projects involve existing buildings that will be undergoing just wholesale renovation as part of these proposals. The first one I want to talk to you about is the changes to the sales office recreation center. This is basically the first building on the right as you wind your way back behind Walmart before you get to the gate. What you have, and you have, council members have a copy of this in your packets as well. You do have an overview of the floor plan. This is a little more artistic colored version, but does a good job of showing you what some of the intended features are in this new recreation area of the sales, of the recreation and sales center. The second document, which was also in your packets, shows a floor plan of the building. The key thing on this is looking at those dark shaded areas. So all of the areas that are in white, that are not highlighted in any way, that's all existing building. The shaded areas are the areas where there are going to be additions. So what you can see here are what I would call three larger additions, all of which are relatively small in the context of the building itself, but you have the one by the entrance to the recreation center, part of the building, another area in here that would be enclosed at the front of the recreation building, and then over in the entrance area to the sales and management office over on this side, you have another addition there. The other ones you see are just smaller pockets here, filling in of just some smaller areas, filling in some notches that already exist, just creating a little bit of additional space in a few other areas. And again, just to clarify what we're looking at here, this portion of the building, where if you can see where I'm going back and forth there, everything to this side is your office functions, your sales and management of the complex, that type of thing. Everything in this larger open area here is part of that recreation complex that we showed the colorful floor plan for. Okay. So there are two, technically they're two different buildings, but they are attached. So there are two attached buildings, and we're dealing with them as one application for tonight. So the key, when this is all said and done, you're looking at about, this is all, the other thing to remember is that the office building is a multi-story building. The recreation is mostly all, it's all one floor as well. So that's why when you look at this, the recreation part looks a lot larger. In actuality, the office area, when this is done, would be 16,757 square feet of office area. The recreation portion, 13,551 square feet. So the total size of the building is a little over 30,000 square feet, 30,308 to be exact. Other improvements related to this project include some site amenities such as sidewalks, addition of some wooden decks at the rear of the building, as well as a small pier and tower structure that would be built over the adjoining pond. And I'll pull up the site plan to get those for you. Okay, so as you're coming in, this would be Cypress Knee Trail, winding your way back toward the gate. And as you pass the building here, again, these are the buildings right here where the additions would be. The other things we're talking about here is a wooden deck along the back in this area. You can see the pier and the tower structure coming out onto the pond right there, as well as some other minor things up front here. Including, there would also be some installation of additional bike racks as part of the project. So as the staff and planning board did the initial review for the project, you have in your staff report a whole variety of things that were looked at. I'd be glad to answer questions about any of those things, but I did want to just specifically touch on a few of those where there seemed to be significant changes, or at least issues that I felt needed public clarification. So I'll begin with parking. As you can see, adjoining the building, really wrapping around it almost in a U shape, almost around three sides, you have a parking area where you basically have 2 rows of parking with a drive aisle in between. And then across on the left side over here near the tennis courts and playground, you have another parking area across the street over in that area that's connected by a walkway here. So those are the areas where parking is provided. You have, again, the staff report some calculations, but I'll just summarize by saying that according to those calculations, there are 138 parking spaces required to serve this project, a minimum of 138. There are presently 147 parking spaces located in these areas in proximity to this project. So the applicants do have enough parking to accommodate this. One important point there that I wanted to clarify for the council is that these calculations are based on an assumption that 2/3 of the customers who would be attending these recreational facilities that they would be serving will be arriving by bicycle or on foot. Okay, now that is not, we're not counting, that statement does not include the sales and management. Those offices are separate. People are going there from outside. But the recreational facilities are going to be only for the guests at the resort. So the assumption was made, and this was an assumption that was made back in 1993 when this project was first approved. So we're not talking about a change in that assumption, but I did want to be clear for you that that is an assumption that was made in those calculations. That 2/3 of the people using them will either be walking or biking from within the resort. Okay. Also wanted to point out, they do have 5 ADA accessible spaces located on the site. That does meet the minimum requirement for the site based on the number of parking spaces. The applicant is proposing to add a 6th ADA space in front of the entrance to the recreation center. right in front of there, probably a good idea for, to serve people with those kind of special mobility needs. So they are adding a sixth space. Also wanted to point out, one of the features you'll see on the site plan right here, this triangle, sort of a hatched area, that is a portion of a gravel area that is used for overflow parking. There are two things you'll notice on this, and I'll touch on this in a little more detail. But one of them is that it not only encroaches into the 15-foot buffer required, but it actually encroaches completely over the property line that runs right here onto the adjoining property, which is still Barrier Island Station property, but that is the side that's zoned planned unit development, the residential side of things. This is something that was not approved with the initial site plan, so it is something that it's existing today, but it is not compliant with the current standards that the town has, nor is it compliant with the approved plan for the original development. So what the staff and planning board have recommended to you is that if we're looking at this, as they're not approved, first of all, we are not counting any of these spaces, and that includes all of the ones even in this area, because they have to go in here to access those. We are not including those in that parking count that we just referenced in those calculations, because they are not approved. And secondly, we're noting, and that's one of the recommendations that was made, that the applicant needs to either remove these spaces or find another proposal to bring these into compliance. What you may note in your packets tonight, you do have a text amendment being requested for public hearing at your next meeting in November. The applicant has made that request that would relieve them of some of the buffer requirements between the property. If the council is amenable and approves that text amendment, then this parking area would be brought into compliance, okay? So that is the applicant's response, if you will. They've proposed that to see if council's willing to do that. And if that's passed in November or whenever you consider it, then it would relieve that violation, okay? The other thing I did want to point out as we move on to the next item, it does involve buffers. And in this PCD district, the commercial part of this property here for Barrier Island Station, there is a buffer requirement of 15 feet in the areas even where it adjoins the adjacent PUD district, the residential part of Barrier Island Station. So even though they function as a single development, you do actually have a physical property line located there. Again, we have a deck that was not approved as part of the original approval. It does exist today, and you can see it comes in and encroaches right here in this corner into that 15 foot. Now, this deck does not go over the property line, but it does encroach into that 15-foot area as well. So that would be another thing that would be addressed if council chooses to approve the amendment proposed at your next meeting. So I did want to point out both of those items. That summarizes the things I wanted to highlight. Did want to note that at their meeting on September the 25th, the planning board reviewed this application and voted unanimously to recommend approval of the site plan with a list of recommended conditions for the council. Subsequently, the applicant's engineer has submitted information that addresses a number of the proposed conditions. So what I wanted to do for you tonight, and maybe it'll help ease the recommendation that the council has as far as the motion. I did want to read off the remaining conditions that have not been addressed at this point. And again, these are conditions recommended by the planning board. First, that the unapproved deck and parking improvements that encroach into the required buffer area must be removed or otherwise brought into compliance with the PCD buffer standards. Second, documentation must be provided that the proposed improvements are in compliance with the state's stormwater permit prior to the issuance of a building permit. Third, a lighting plan including any changes to the existing exterior lighting must be approved by the Planning and Inspections Department prior to the issuance of a building permit. And fourth, an as-built survey for the subject property, height certification for the building, an elevation certificate for the building must be submitted and approved prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy. So those are the items. Mr. Calvin, the engineer who has been representing the applicant, will have a comment regarding the second of those items, so he will point out something for you for your consideration. Were there any questions?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I have one too. but go
Okay,
ahead.
I have one. It has to do with the parking.
Sure.
The fact that there's some overflow parking that was added in there, does that demonstrate that the assumption about 2/3 of the people coming on foot or by bicycle or having, maybe isn't working? Or what was the need that resulted in that?
It's a good
Overflow
question.
parking.
From personal knowledge or experience, I don't know the answer as to why, how often that area is used or whether, how necessary it was. I really don't know offhand, or what the reasons are. Mr. Calfee may
Ralph?
be able to help with that.
Well, okay, my question was going along those same lines, but I'll take a different tack that may answer the question. I remember not that many years ago, every time I went to Walmart, I was being pestered by somebody trying to sell a fitness, membership to Berry Island, to that thing we're talking about. Now, I don't think I understood that there was an assumption bicyclers and walkers would be coming from the timeshares. So either that extra parking lot was put there to accommodate people that were literally driving in to use this membership that was being hawked, or something else. So now we'll open the question to,
And Mayor Perry,
Ralph.
I can answer the second. I can answer your question.
okay,
At the planning board meeting, that very specific issue was brought up, and the applicants have stated that, whereas in the past, they did allow members from outside, who weren't guests at the resort, to use those fitness facilities. That is no longer going to be the case, that they will be solely for the guests of the resort. So that is a change from past policy that the applicants did state that is their intent at the planning board meeting.
okay. So now I know that if I'm pestered at Walmart for a membership, I shouldn't be. All right.
I wanted to join.
Anyone else have a question for? All right, Mr. Calfee?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Ralph Calfee, representing the applicant. Touch on the question about the parking area, what is now a gravel area. That parking area was originally paved by, let's just say, the rascal who did the original development over there, because it was a space where parking could be put. In fact, it was used as employee parking because it was handy for them to park there, and it worked out just great. It was not done because of any need or perceived need, and in fact, in all the years I worked on that project, I never saw the parking lot full. And there was a period of time back in the early days when they had their sales promotions every second, third, or fourth day, or whatever. Yeah, things were really booming. Timeshare was moving right along. But no, it was not put in because of a need for parking. It was put in for convenience and put into a space that looked pretty handy. Let's pave it. And after it was paved, when we pointed out that they really couldn't have done that, it was switched to gravel. And as Joe said, we don't count those spaces. Now, we have made application that will make some of that, if you approve on a zoning amendment, will make some of that parking area allowable or usable. But the recommendations that are before you says that for the parking area and for a deck that encroaches into setback, that we acknowledge and we agree that those have to be fixed, or we find another solution. Well, if we don't find another solution, then they get fixed, period. And we are fully in agreement with that. That's not a problem. Okay. Joe has indicated that there are 4 conditions that he would suggest for your approval. The first one we've talked about, no problem. There are 2 others that if we do a lighting amendment, that we would need to submit to the town and obtain their approval. We have no problem with that. As of right now, there's no plan to change the lighting, but if the lighting is changed, then we know we've got to come back, and there's no problem with that. Joe pointed out that an as-built survey is necessary. We don't disagree at all. That could be done, should be done, should have been one a long time ago. There will be one for this project, no issue at all. The point that I want to bring to you is with respect to the second condition that Joe was talking about, and that is with respect to stormwater permits. Now, we know that your normal approval for a site plan approval, where we're still in the process of getting stormwater permits, would say that you cannot acquire a building permit prior to obtaining a stormwater permit. Okay. I would suggest to you that this animal is a little bit different, and it's the reason why we're making the request that I will put before you. And that is that this is a project that is already existing. Now, you have some that you've dealt with it that way, but clearly this is one that already is existing. We already have a stormwater plan, but the stormwater plan we have now doesn't exactly address some of the changes. Joe, can you put up the floor plan very quickly, that small sheet?
The second one with the highlighted.
Yeah, with the grayed in areas. Okay, with respect to the additions that we're going to make to the footprint of the building, all of the additions that are over on the right, that are in the sales office area, will be over existing sidewalk or something. The addition that's shown at the bottom of the screen, which is admittedly the largest addition. Now, that one's going to be half over sidewalk and half over grass, approximately half and half. The addition to the left of that, the oddly shaped one, that's over existing sidewalk and under roof. The addition on the end, which is a little tiny corner addition, that's over deck. Now, y'all consider that development or coverage, but state stormwater doesn't. So for them, that would be new coverage. All right. The state stormwater regulations, Lord knows we've got a lot of hoops to jump and all that, but they have a basic fundamental point that they get to, and that is when you're required to obtain a stormwater permit. The reason for that is you cannot do any new or additional impervious development prior to obtaining a permit and doing the stormwater management necessary for it. If you're going into a site that is an open field, you're gonna move in and you gotta do all kinds of site clearing and site preparation and all that sort of stuff. Well, normally we do that and we don't need a building permit. Therefore, it's not a problem that we haven't yet obtained a building permit, and you don't need state stormwater for it because you haven't done any impervious development. So what we're gonna ask you to do here is to take a step beyond the normal and say, all right, and I know Joe, I've talked to him about half of what I'm gonna propose to you, and that is any construction, any new development we do inside the existing building footprint clearly does not require a new stormwater permit. Clearly it doesn't. Actually, any development that we do that does not increase lot coverage also doesn't require a stormwater permit, because we're not doing anything that they're trying to protect. So what we are asking you to do is, in this case, say, yes, they can pull their building permit, but they cannot do any development that increases impermeable cover prior to, number one, obtaining a permit, and number two, implementing the permit. Now, quite frankly, that's something that's a subtle distinction that very often gets overlooked. Folks get their stormwater permit, they go to work. Well, a lot of times, they end up actually being ahead of the game because they haven't implemented the plan. They haven't put in the basins, they haven't put in the swales. They just get busy and pour a concrete slab, or put in impermeable cover for a parking lot. When in fact, you can't do that until you have your stormwater plan implemented so that runoff has a place to go. So, recognizing all these things and the criteria and all that, we're asking you to, as I say, take a step and say, well, all right, let's condition this on no new impermeable cover prior to acquiring and implementing the stormwater permit. But that would allow the building permit to be issued so that they can start new construction. They got a lot of footings and stuff to do, but they also have these additions and columns to support roof and that sort of thing that really need to be done. So that's our request for you. Certainly address any questions that you have.
Yes, I went out there, and I'm glad I did now. On that lower part of the building, I don't have a problem with the right side there, the office space, that's all paved anyway, or
Yes.
sidewalk or whatever's there. But what they're planning to do is do away with some trees, shrubberies between the parking lot and that new addition. If I understood what he was telling me today correctly, because he had a landscaper coming out to see how they could save trees. Is that the area that you're saying, we're trying to give you a building permit, but you won't disturb until you get the stormwater permit?
That's correct. That area is half over sidewalk, half over
Right.
existing vegetation. And no, we would not propose to do that because that would be new impervious cover.
Would you have to come back to us or just go through
No.
admin to get it?
What I'm suggesting is that we just have to get the approval from the state, we have to implement it. Staff will be fully aware of what we're doing and how we do it. And in fact, I have to provide, or an engineer does, and they usually expect it's the engineer who presented the issue, would have to provide a certification to the state that this work has been completed prior to constructing impermeable cover, this new impermeable cover.
Okay,
So, yeah, there are actually some securities there, I think, that assure that it'll be done like we're saying it'll be done. It's
Okay.
a far cry from what it was 20 years ago when this project started. A far cry.
well, I understand it because I saw it,
Well,
and I don't have a problem with
yeah,
that.
I went over there today too and looked around, and I think I know where that is also. It's like right there at the front.
Right there at the
Yeah.
front,
But I may just be a little dense, but what you're asking for is for the building permit to be issued without first getting the stormwater permit, with the understanding that there would be no development that has impervious surface or anything that would require that stormwater permit until the stormwater permit is obtained? Is that what you're asking?
That's what we're talking about. yeah.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
I have no problem with it either.
Jeff?
I'm good with it.
I'm fine.
I went out there, I'm fine.
Okay. It pays
Not
to,
going to get any trouble, are we, Steve? No, okay. There we go.
well, I guess the only,
Propose anything.
Oh,
okay,
you would, yeah.
the only question I have for you, Steve, is this item 2, which we're kind of making a change to. When we get ready to make the motion,
You need to change the wording in that a little bit to track exactly what you're saying here. And what Mr. Calvi has said is, you'll give me the building permits, but we won't do any construction that will create impermeable surface until we have implemented the stormwater plan that's been approved and implemented, until he has the actual changes on the ground that are required for that permit.
Okay.
All right.
Actually, amazingly enough, I have a draft that I'd be willing to share with y'all.
That sounds terrific to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
What a
Just
guy.
amazing.
You're so nice, Ralph.
Hey, just try to help out.
Are we ready to make
The
a
last
motion,
guy with the
folks?
paper in his hand does the motion. Yeah.
Well, actually, we appreciate that, because we want to keep it right. We do, so. Do I hear a motion? What'd you do, pass that on down?
He's passed it on here. I'm sending it back.
Well, I'll make the motion if you give me the paper.
Yes, send it.
Okay,
Wow.
pass the paper around.
All right. Okay, I think I've got it here. I move to grant approval of this site plan for the proposed expansion and renovations to the Sales and Recreation Center building at Barrier Island Station, subject to the following conditions. First, unapproved deck and parking improvements that encroach into the required buffer area must be removed or otherwise brought into compliance with the PCD buffer standards. Second, a building permit for new construction may be issued prior to issuance of a state stormwater permit for the work, but work that increases net impermeable lot coverage shall not commence prior to the issuance and implementation of any state stormwater permit required for the work and applicant's documentation of the implementation. Third, a lighting plan, including any changes to the existing exterior lighting, must be approved by the Planning and Inspections Department prior to the issuance of a building permit. Fourth, an as-built survey for the subject property, height certification for the building, and elevation certificate for the building must be submitted and approved prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any further comment? Opposed? No. None? All right. You got it. Okay, that was quite a review. Now we have B's, the fitness center part.
Refer to it as round two. Yes. Okay, now what we're dealing with, for those of you who've been out and visited this site, this would be the building that's located just beyond the ones we were just talking about. So you'd kind of go further into the site. It's in very close proximity. There is an existing walkway to this building from the recreation center area we just looked at. And, but this area is really oriented more toward the large outdoor pool that's on the site there. So if we're looking at that in the pretty picture here with that outlines the floor plan, what you'll see is the pool area, and this one's actually, I guess, here, let me flip it around, sorry. Just to get it the same as yours. Okay, so again, you have a walkway coming over from the other building presently into this pavilion building. And then you have the pool area down here to the right. Kind of, you can just see a little touch of it off the edge there. So this is, a lot of this is oriented toward the pool and really serves, it's associated with that, and a lot of its activities and functions serve that pool area as a gathering spot for many of the guests. So what's being proposed here, for those of you who've had a chance to look at the building, you've got again, it was originally laid out as a pavilion. A portion of it has been filled in right now. You know, probably about, it would be about half of it is filled in right now. The proposal would be twofold, and let me pull up the second item here. First aspect is to add a small addition on it, right here, this little shaded area on the front of the property, the front of the building, approximately 550 square foot addition. Just for context, this is a little over 5,000 square feet right now, the building itself. So about, a little over 10% addition there. There is also a proposal to add 500 square foot of deck on the rear part of the building, so it would be coming along here. You'll see that a little more clearly on the site plan itself. And then the remaining area under the roof would be enclosed. So you have again, a physical addition to the front for an enclosed addition, a deck on the rear in this area, and then the remaining portion, the remaining half of the building that's not presently enclosed would also be enclosed. So there's a net of, just say approximately 3,000 square feet of additional enclosed area between the addition and what's being enclosed under the roof. Okay. Again, I'll highlight a few of the things that the board discussed in their review. Let me pull this up. This site plan was a little more challenging to look at, I realize, just because the scale of this property. This is the residential property we're talking about now, so it's actually much larger in scale than the other, and therefore it's a little harder to, we'll have to kind of hone in on it here on the site plan that we're showing this evening. Okay. So what we're looking at is this corner of the property up front. You can see the fitness center building here. The majority of what is on your site plan, you're going to see, isn't going to be relevant to what we're talking about tonight. So we're really just focusing on this corner up here. You can see that property line we were referring to with the other application for the PCD district, and the recreation building is located over here, over in this area. So you can see it's a fairly close proximity the way it flows in. The guardhouse is up in this area right here in that island in the road to give you an idea of where this building is. So it can still be accessed from outside, but can also be accessed directly from inside the gate as well over in this area. There is on this part of the project, there is at least some change to the proposed uses. They all fall under the same general categories that they were originally. Prior to this project, this area is being used. You have restrooms, changing rooms, snack bar, things like, well, you'll have a larger snack bar. You'll add a spa and fitness facility as part of this proposal. So they're expanding on, some of those amenities that they're offering right now, but it seems to fall within that same realm of uses that have been permitted previously. One thing I did want to point out on this one that we didn't need to get into on the other has to do with lot coverage. This section of the development, one thing to point out about Bear Island, it is a phased development. Many of those phases have been developed. There are still a number of them left to go, all of which are residential in nature. But this phase is about 1.4 acres in size. So if we're looking at this as just an individual phase and the standards for it, you'll note on the information you have from the applicant that the lot coverage is actually 64.8%, which would exceed the limitations in this district. However, this property is actually a whole, although it's divided into phases for development purposes, it is a whole larger property. And at the time of its initial approval, the council reviewed the phases and looked at the overall impacts at build-out. And the way that is, with the standards that are in place, the development as built out would still be under 30% lot coverage as a whole. So you do have this area, which is more intensely developed, with the amenities and things. You have more lot coverage in this area, but if you look at the project as a whole, for all of the remaining all of the existing and remaining phases, it still comes in at under 30% lot coverage. So I did want to be clear about that and point that out to you. Again, looking at parking, the unique thing we have on this one is that there is actually no parking associated with these amenities. You do have the provision of 4 ADA accessible spaces located over here beyond the guardhouse and inside the development there. So you do have those that are in close proximity to the pool area, so to provide access to people who have some mobility issues right there in close proximity, rather than having to park all the way over in the recreation and sales area. However, there are no specifically dedicated spaces for this portion of the development. Now again, that is consistent with the original approval. The thought here is that all of these spaces, all of these facilities are solely and have always been solely for use of the guests. This is not an area that has been open to the public, through membership or anything like that. So even the original approval had allowed these amenities without any parking, under the presumption that it would all be for guests who would be in relatively close proximity and could either walk or bike there. For those who choose or cannot do so, you would have the other parking area that we looked at in the previous project. That's in relatively close proximity and has paved access over to this area. So for those folks, that would be available as well. But I did want to point that out. On this project, and this is one of the curious quirk that we'll get into detail when we talk about the text amendment next month, relating to buffers. I talked about the impact of the buffer requirement that was in the PCD district for the other project. Curiously enough, in the PUD, the residential side of the development, there is actually a buffer requirement 50 feet in width along all the exterior boundaries, but there's a provision that specifically waives that requirement for these internal property lines where the PCD and PUD districts meet. And that's really what's being proposed by the text amendment, is that a corresponding statement be put into the PCD district. So what that means is that there is not an issue on this property as far as having any structures or other improvements, such as in here you can see there's some paths that meander through there, sidewalks. That is not an issue on this property, because there is not a requirement that they'd be set back or buffered from that internal property line right here. The buffer still applies to all of the adjoining neighborhoods, all adjoining property, it still applies, but not to that internal line. Those are the ones I wanted to highlight, so I'll just note that, as with the other project, the planning board met on September 25th, and after reviewing, voted unanimously to recommend approval of this site plan for the expansion to the fitness center. Again, the board came up with 6 recommended conditions for the council to consider. As with the other application, the applicant did provide some revisions in the plans that were given to the council for review tonight, and 3 of those items have already been addressed. So we have only 3 remaining conditions that are recommended from the planning board. And I suspect Mr. Calfee will be asking for a very similar comment on item 1, but what the board did recommend was documentation must be provided that the proposed improvements are in compliance with the state stormwater permit prior to the issuance of a building permit. Number 2, a lighting plan, including any changes to the existing exterior lighting, must be approved by the Planning and Inspections Department prior to the issuance of a building permit. And finally, an as-built survey for the subject property and an elevation certificate for the building must be submitted and approved prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy. You will note that that last one is a little different. We are not asking for a height certification on this project because they're not proposing to change the roof line at all, whereas the other project they were. So that's why that's not in there as well. So those are the remaining recommendations that are left from the planning board, and I'd certainly be glad to answer any questions the council might have.
Anyone have questions? No, sir. No? All right. I expect Mr. Calfee needs to probably bring his paper up again.
We'll let you use the draft we used last time around, the languages.
It's the same.
Actually, this one is a little bit easier in that the plan right now, well, let me, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're proposing is 550 square foot addition on the east side of the building. A good part of that is over sidewalk, but part of it is not. We're proposing a deck on the west side. Most of that deck is over existing sidewalk. Part of it is not. If it's a wood deck, it doesn't count for coverage for the state stormwater anyway. But the difference on this project is that all the planning that I've been introduced on this one is to reduce the lot coverage of this phase. In our stormwater permits, even though we now have one combined permit for the total project, which we accomplished with the state this past summer, we actually, the intent, as I understand it, is to reduce the lot coverage because every square inch of conceivable deck around the pool was paved with concrete all the way up to the retaining walls, which were hard against the wetlands. But now the thinking is, well, we'll cut back some of that, do some nice plantings around the perimeter, which in fact will reduce the lot coverage for the total project. And if it does, then the state just says, okay, you know, it really is simple. But until we get that, the same language is entirely appropriate that says we don't do any new impermeable cover, any additional net cover prior to having the permit and implementing the permit.
Okay. Anybody?
No, sir. No, sir.
You want to do her again?
Well,
You just do it so good.
well, reading was something I actually, passed the standard test. This one?
That same one that you read last time.
Okay, all right. Did I read the right one last time?
Well, let's say yes.
Okay,
There were very slight nuance difference, but the one you read actually applies to both of them, so.
okay, so I'll read that one again then.
Yeah.
Okay. I move to grant approval of this site plan for the proposed expansion and renovations to the fitness center building at Barrier Island Station, subject to the following conditions. First, a building permit for new construction may be issued prior to the issuance of a state stormwater permit for the work, but work that increases net impermeable lot coverage shall not commence prior to the issuance and implementation of any state stormwater permit required for the work and applicant's documentation of the implementation. Second, a lighting plan including any changes to the existing exterior lighting must be approved by the Planning and Inspections Department prior to the issuance of a building permit. And third, an as-built survey for the subject property and elevation certificate for the building must be submitted and approved prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy.
Do I hear a second? Second. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, you have it. Welcome to Kitty Hawk.
Yeah.
Do your thing. All right, moving on. We have several calls for public hearing, and it's time someone other than M did that. Do I hear a motion to call for public hearing text amendment? And this has to do with flood hazard reduction standards.
Mr. Mayor, I move to set a public hearing for the town council meeting on November 3rd, 2014 regarding the proposed text amendment to amend subsection 1490 6A, the Kitty Hawk Town Code is suggested to allow alternative options for recreational vehicles to comply with flood hazard reduction standards.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The next one is a call for public hearing, and it's an application to amend Chapter 40, Article 3, to update standards for wireless communication facilities to be consistent with state and federal laws. Some updates there. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to set a public hearing for the town council meeting on November the 3rd, 2014 regarding the proposed text amendment to update Chapter 40, Article 3 of the Town Code with revised standards for wireless communication facilities.
Do I hear a second? Second. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that call is made. Next, we have a call for public hearing, and this deals back with the things we've been talking about. Call for public hearing, text amendment for the PCD and PUDs. Do I hear a motion?
Yeah, make a motion, call for public hearing, text amendment, application to amend subsection 42-4193 of the town code by eliminating the requirements for a buffer area between adjoining PCD and PUD zoning districts. Public hearing is supposed to be scheduled for the November 3rd, 2014 town council meeting.
Do I hear a second? Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now we move on to new business. Possible revision of municipal service district map. This has to do with the potential beach nourishment. And basically what we're doing here is we had 4 zones planned, and we're consolidating or proposing to consolidate down to 2 zones. And the essence of it is commercial would be in a zone that would have a higher tax rate under municipal, dedicated to beach nourishment. And the green in this particular case, or residential, would have a lesser tax rate, with the idea that the people that benefit the most would be commercial, but everyone needs to share into the cost of this project. So what we're doing is undergoing an approval or change to a new map.
District A is both residential.
I'm sorry?
You were just talking about the west side of 158 when you said commercial versus residential. In
Yes.
District A, it's
Right.
all residential and commercial.
Do we have this for that? So we can show the people, the public? And John, if you will, I know you've got a readout, so I'm going to ask you to look into the background, because that's where we're going into it, when you read out.
As a part of the legal requirements to establish municipal service districts in the state of North Carolina, Kitty Hawk is required to prepare a map of the proposed MSDs and provide that information to all affected property owners, along with information about the intent of the MSDs to propose tax rates. Once approved, the attached map of the proposed MSDs and the attached letter containing information about the intent of the MSDs projects and public hearing notifications will be sent to all property owners in Kitty Hawk according to a schedule to be set by council. The information must be sent at least 4 weeks prior to the public hearing on establishment of the MSDs.
All right, and during the meetings that I've attended on the plan that CP&E has given us and talking with the other towns, basically, I became aware that all the other places are down to 2 districts. And it simplifies the situation for both us and the people that we're asking to be taxed. So I asked the manager to bring this back to us, and now I'm asking you, if you have no objections, to approve it. Are there any questions to that?
I have just one. You referred to this whole district as a commercial. We were rezoning to all commercial, even though that some of this is still residential, but it's in the rental area, and there is income coming in from some of these residents, as well as there are people that live there year-round.
Right.
But just to clarify that it's more, some of it is in residential, but it's also in the rental areas.
Yeah, the only distinction, most of District A is residential, is zoned residential,
Right.
most of it.
Right. Even though it might be
Right.
rented.
Right, it might be
Right.
rented, but that's
Right.
still considered residential
Right.
property. But I think that the only difference, or where the commercial properties are distinguished, is on the west side of
Right.
158. Because the only properties that are in District A, the higher tax district, are on the west side of 158 are commercial properties.
Right.
All the residential properties on the west side of 158 are in District B. Isn't that correct, Gary?
As far as I can tell,
Yeah.
I think that's
Yes,
correct.
yes.
Now, well, let me back up a minute. I suppose if you go down to the barge landing or someplace like that, you could say that's commercial property. But to try to,
Yeah, right.
that's stretching it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're way back in the woods now. So we've got to be realistic. This is the beach, and these are the people over here that are benefiting most from the beach.
Sure.
And the barge landing is,
Right,
yeah,
I just
it
didn't
does,
want
but it
everybody
doesn't.
to think we were going to do all commercial the way it
Yeah,
first said. I
it-
want to make it clear that we were trying to incorporate the commercials on the west side of the bypass.
It's really
primarily.
just on the immediate west side. of the
Yes,
Exactly.
right, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Any further comments like that?
A lot easier to understand, I like it.
All right. Then do I hear a motion to approve this new map?
I move to approve the new map.
A second.
All right. Now, we're doing, actually,
Now we gotta do the letter.
yeah, actually, his recommended motion is talking about that. So let's back up just a minute. And we made a motion.
Well, all we've done is approve the map.
All right.
We could get more specific.
All right, so let's
get
do
the
that.
letter
We'll have
into
to do it in 2 places, basically, is what we'll do. So we have a motion to approve the map. Do I hear a second for that? All right. Any further comments? All in favor of approving the map?
Aye.
All right, opposed? All right, the map is basically approved, so now you have a document to work from. Now we're talking about the proposed letter that would go out to property owners. And it does not have dates and times that we need yet, but it's the draft letter that would be with the times and the amounts into it put in place. So we're approving the draft so that council or staff has something to work from. All right? Does anyone have any comments on that?
Well, I do.
I know you do.
Yeah. My first comment is that in the letter, at the very start of it, it talks about the reasons for pursuing this project. And at several council meetings, we have discussed the reasons for the project and tried to get the contractor to take our reasons, which had a priority for infrastructure and for flooding between the highways, and then also for oceanfront properties. And so what I would recommend is, instead of using the 4 reasons that are in this letter, that we just remain consistent with everything we have said up until this point about what our reasons are for doing this project. And I have taken the reasons out of the concept that the contractor did, and these were the reasons that we corrected when they first presented it to us, and it was incorrect. So I just feel like it's important to maintain consistency with our intent for what this project is all about for Kitty Hawk.
And I agree with that.
I do too.
Anyone disagree with that? All right. So in essence, this particular letter these 4 items will be removed in favor of,
Of the three that.
three that you're
Right,
proposing.
and I have sent an email to
Right.
Yes.
you, John, that
Yes.
has that text in it.
Yes.
Okay, but those 4 need to come out. Okay, the next thing I think should be added would be, right after, let's see, in the 3rd paragraph that ends in a parenthetical expression which says, "In this case, beach nourishment storm damage reduction projects," if you see that in your letter, I would like to add the following. If the municipal service districts are approved, tax rates will be established for each district with collection beginning July 1st, 2015, for a duration of 5 years. Tax revenue will pay for debt service on the loan required to fund Kitty Hawk's share of the project cost. And the reason that I think that should go in there is that there's no mention in the letter that these tax rates will only be in effect for 5 years in order to pay off that debt. And when people are getting a letter that talks about raising their taxes, in the double digits, I think it would be a little bit soothing for them to know that it's not going to last forever. So that's the other recommendation that I have.
Any questions about that? Any disagreement with that?
Yes, sir.
Irvin, you okay with that? You're thinking.
I think so, all right.
Okay, you have any
Did you say
additions?
you're right?
Huh?
Did you say okay?
All right.
All right. Okay, no, that was it.
Okay, the only thing that I want to add to what M has done is over here on the last page, you were invited to attend a public hearing to be held at blah, 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 in this meeting room. You reckon we're going to have an overflow for that, the way we did when we first brought this up? And should we consider an alternate? Should we put the word "in the Smith's meeting room" or as determined by the manager, for example?
Yeah,
To cover,
sure.
maybe going to Kitty Hawk School or some other place for overflow. We had people that couldn't get in the room, and that bothers me. It's bothered me ever since I learned that. And,
Well, we'll have to make a decision before the letter goes out, right? Because
well, no, if we add, and that's what I'm asking you, if we add something to the effect, in Smith's meeting room, or as determined by the manager.
Well, I guess the only thing that I would wonder about is people that are coming from out of town. How would we have to send another letter out saying, here's where the meeting is going to be held, or?
We have all kinds of media outlets and we have the paper and other things. We'll know, we'll have to decide, will we have an overflow crowd? And decide in a timely fashion whether or not this place will hold it, and should we go somewhere else? And I'm throwing that out for your thoughts. What do you think?
Might make help the decision to understand that last time, I do know 3 or 4 people that were on the phone for 4 or 5 days prior to that meeting, lobbying everyone to come out. They did a good job of getting the people out when they needed to.
So what you're saying is we can probably expect an overflow.
I think that group got what they wanted. And I don't think it's going to be as much this time as it was then.
All right.
Yeah, I really believe that the people that came here from out of town for that previous meeting are only going to show up here for this meeting if they get hit with the tax rate and they decide, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted, you know. And I have to say that when I talk to people on the beach, I have really yet to hear from anybody that says, oh, no, you know, we know we're gonna have to pay more. Okay, so,
Steve, if we send a letter as it is, does it create a problem? Should we need to move?
It might create a problem. I didn't bring the statutes with me on the MSDs, but I know you've got to you've got to advertise the public hearing, was it 4 weeks before you?
Yes.
Right.
You
Yes.
have it. Now, you know, if you're published notice of the hearing that you're going to have to do, you may be able to correct it in that, but without looking at the statute, I'm not exactly
Okay.
sure if you're
Well,
going to
all we're
send a-
doing tonight is actually approving a draft for staff to work
Correct.
from. So it shouldn't be a problem, because we're not ready to send these out yet anyway.
Right.
Okay.
And so that gives you a little bit of time to try to decide, should we just go ahead and plan to have it somewhere else? And
Okay.
you may want to do that.
Okay.
You may have a
All
lot
right.
of folks around that show up,
After
just
looking
out of
at-
curiosity, if nothing else.
After looking at what happened to Southern Shores when they went to Kitty Hawk School and scared the kids from protesters, I don't know if that's a good option or not, but anyway, we're trying to think ahead and outside the box. All right. Do I hear a motion to approve the draft letter with the changes that Em has brought forward?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Any further comment? All in favor?
I,
Opposed? All right. Staff has something to work with. And now it's reports from the town manager.
Mr. Mayor, I have a couple of things for council I want to mention to you. We had recently received a compliment from Wendy Cooper about helpfulness of Sergeant Brian Strickland. Ms. Cooper owns a cottage at 4155 Lindbergh Avenue, and it appears that a construction company was using Mrs. Cooper's property for parking while working down the road. Ms. Cooper called our police department, and the call was taken by Sergeant Strickland, who told Ms. Cooper that he would act on the situation. Sergeant Strickland contacted the construction company and talked to the construction crew, and this took care of the problem. And Mrs. Cooper was very grateful of the assistance from Sergeant Strickland, so I just want to mention that. Also, just to briefly, on the progress of our storm damage reduction project with Coastal Planning and Engineering. They've completed some 68.9% of the scope of work as of September the 1st. The work in September represents the development of environmental documents, beach field design analysis, and data collection and analysis associated with the offshore sand search. So we're continuing to get information from them, and hopefully we'll have more information in the next few weeks pertaining to that.
And we have another
Another meeting coming up.
on the 14th. right?
14th, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll
And-
get clarification.
We have, hopefully we'll get a better idea of what option is available to us and where it's going to go.
Yes, that's correct.
Steve, you have anything?
The Winks matter is still pending. It was scheduled last Monday, but the attorney representing the defendant had a trial in criminal superior court in Pasquotank County, which takes precedence. So we're now scheduled for October the 29th, but my star witness is on vacation that day, so we'll see. I think I've got it in shape that I may be able to do it just with the affidavits and what I have, but
Wow, that's been going on forever.
well, welcome to my world.
Yeah, I know. All right, comments from town council. Jeff, you got anything?
I have none.
Craig?
Yes, sir.
Irvin?
I have nothing.
nothing.
Well, the only thing I have is, I called the lawyer dealing with the Overton property, and he has one person that needed to be served, one heir that needed to be served, that refused to be served, and he had to call out the sheriff's department. He doesn't yet know whether the service actually occurred. Apparently, the fellow is afraid to death that the lawyer's trying to get money from him, and it's just the opposite. So anyway, there's no progress on that, but it is out there and it's being worked. And eventually, something's going to happen there, so I'll let you know when I know. All right. Public comment. Anyone wish to speak at this part of the hearing? No? Let the record show no one came forward. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're out of here. Thank you.